Let's bring in Kim Rubenstein from the 50/50 by 2030 Foundation and Professor of Constitutional Law at the University of Canberra. Very good evening to you. What sort of Supreme Court Justice do you think Amy Coney Barrett will be?
Look, I think time will tell in that respect, and I think one of the really important points now that she has been confirmed and is due to take her place on the bench is the nature of the independence of the judicial branch in systems like Australia and the US, where they are completely independent, and her position now for life means that she is entirely able to reflect and act in her judicial office without any strings attached. It is up to her to make those decisions.
That's a very purist way of looking at it. Do you really think that that happens when appointments are in the US seen as political? Donald Trump was very keen to get her in very quickly.
Look, I think the nature of the US appointment process is quite distinctive from the Australian one in that regard, the political nature of the process. And the reality is that individuals, when they are appointed, then are in fact independent. And so sure, we can look at their earlier judgments and we can assess whether they are likely to be more conservative or less conservative, but every single judge has that capacity to grow in office. And also, when we reflect on the nature of their decision making, they're not necessarily universally predictable in terms of the cases that come before the court. So whilst we can look at her judicial philosophy as being more conservative, I don't think we can be guaranteed as to what the outcomes will be in cases that come before her.
No, as you say, time will tell on that, but there are concerns, particularly on the left, that things like Obamacare, rulings on abortion, she's a staunch Christian, as you'll know, and the issue of voting, the presidential elections, I mean, all of these things are political issues.
They are indeed, and that again is a contrast to the Australian system in terms of the natures of the decisions that come before those courts. But again, just even referring to her Christian values, I think we need to also be aware and reflect on in assessing the place of courts in our constitutional systems, how important it is to have diversity on the courts. Diversity not just in terms of a notion of political diversity, which is what is often discussed, but diversity in life experience through which one views and interprets the law, because law is not just a scientific tool. So that even though the cases in the US tend to be more political in that formalistic sense, the reality is that the courts look at case-by-case scenarios that can play out quite differently than the way it is reported in that sort of a black and white sense. I don't think, or in a binary sense, I don't think that is always the case. And one of the, I guess, safeguards that we need to be reminded of now that she has been confirmed is that true independence, and that she will grow into the job. She's only in her late 40s.
Well, actually, that was one thing I wanted to talk. You mentioned diversity and life experience. Yes. Do you see her youth and the length of time she will serve potentially on the Supreme Court as an advantage or a disadvantage?
I think there's a mix, absolute mix. I mean, I think there's no question that she's qualified. She's been a federal court judge. So youth in that respect is not undermining in any sense of her capacity, but it is relevant in terms of being able to think through and interpret the application of laws, and having a variety of ages on a bench is a positive one. The length of her time on the court, again, adds into her judicial independence. And in a sense, as I said earlier, means that she may grow into that position in a way that reflects the actual experience of being a Supreme Court judge. And they're things that I think are relevant here in Australia as much as they are in the US, even though our style of appointment is quite different.
OK. Just finally, Professor, what do you make of the ongoing discussion about changing the terms surrounding the Supreme Court? Joe Biden has refused to commit so far. He says he'll make a statement after the election about whether he will stack the Supreme Court, that he can potentially add more Supreme Justices, and perhaps discussion of it not being a complete life term. What do you make of those discussions?
Look, I think they're healthy questions to be raising in any framework. One is the load of a court at any time, and so having more justices is not only necessarily about that notion of balancing out one of the different natures of conservatism or otherwise. There is also workload, so that's another framework. And I think also, as Australia has shown, there are serious questions as to whether it is more appropriate to have a fixed term, not in the sense of it being a reappointment, but that retirement at a particular age is appropriate also to enable that diversity to be properly engaged with. And that's something, again, that is positive in Australia by having an age limit for High Court justices. We're still waiting to hear about the 2 new High Court justices who are about to be appointed to our High Court, and it's a very different system that we could talk about also.
Yeah, we could. Another time, perhaps. Professor Kim Rubenstein from the University of Canberra, thanks very much.
My pleasure.